killing for females, the most common is financial gain, whereas for men it's often sexual gain. The ways in which they kill also differ. Women's primary means are poison, and men's are asphyxiation. A woman being born illegitimately to two alcoholic parents wasn't easy for young Mary Bennett. But trying to escape her father's murderous rage was even harder. Not once but twice Charles Bennett, her ruthless dad, tried to kill her. Mary Mabel Bennett was born to Charles and Johanna Bennett. Her father was reportedly a mentally ill alcoholic who was unable to hold down a job. As a result, he was abusive and tried to kill her a number of times. The first time occurred shortly after her birth, when Charles tried smothering Mary in the crib. Later, he tried again. When that didn't work, he attempted to poison his daughter with laudanum. All 3 times, Mary survived. No one expected Charles' actions would trigger warped fantasies in young Mary, but that's exactly what happened. Tragic childhoods are often a contributing factor in building a killer. At 15 years old, in 1898, Mary married Marcus Rogers, a man 12 years her senior, and moved from Hoosick Falls, New York to Shaftesbury, Vermont. In the spring of 1901, Mary gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Helen Alice Rogers. Marcus could not have been more overjoyed, but motherhood wasn't part of Mary's plan. 6 months later, Mary sprinted out the house in tears. At a neighbor's home she cried out that she'd accidentally dropped baby Helen. When the neighbor returned to the house with Mary, the infant lay dying of a fractured skull. As Mary Mabel Rogers was the sole eyewitness, authorities forewent an inquiry. But Marcus' relatives believed Mary had murdered the baby. Their suspicions gained traction several months later when Marcus became violently ill after drinking a cup of tea prepared by his wife. Not long after, Mary moved out of the house. Marcus, however, clung to the hope that they would reconcile. The couple had only been married a few years when Marcus returned to Hoosick Falls, New York to work at his brother's farm. He begged Mary to join him, but she refused to leave Vermont. In June 1902, Mary met 3 young men that would forever change her life's trajectory. 21-year-old Morris Knapp lived with his family on Birch Street and worked as a laborer. When not at work, he fulfilled his duty with the Vermont National Guard. Shortly after meeting Morris, Mary moved out of the Spalding house and boarded at the home of Emmett and Laura Perham on Beach Street, where she became much too acquainted with their 2 sons, Levi and Leon. Marcus Rogers found work as a laborer in Hoosick Falls, New York, while Mary lived in Bennington, Vermont. Although Marcus pleaded with his wife to join him in Hoosick Falls, she refused. Mary Rogers struck up relationships with a laborer, Morris Knapp, and 2 brothers living in the same residence house as Knapp, Leon and Levi Perham. Rogers first approached Levi Perham with an offer of $500 if he would kill her husband. Levi initially agreed to help her, but he was intoxicated at the time and later backed out. He did not tell the police because he felt it was just idle talk. On Sunday, August 10th, pillow talk led to a conversation about the slow murder of her husband, Marcus. For Leon's services, Mary promised to pay $500 clean dollars from the life insurance. The next day, Leon agreed to help, even though Mary made it clear that her primary objective was to marry Morris Knapp. Mary then organized a picnic. At some point during the picnic, Mary offered to show her husband a rope trick she had learned from a friend. Mary tied Perham's hand several times, and each time Perham easily broke free of the restraint, with Mary pretending to be disappointed when he did so. Mary then challenged her husband to try the trick. She tied his wrists a few times, and he also easily broke free. Then Mary convinced Perham to try the trick on her husband. When Perham bound Marcus's wrists behind his back, Rogers could not break free. Mary took a vial of chloroform from her purse and forced her husband to breathe it in for about 20 minutes, until he stopped struggling. Mary went through Marcus's pockets and removed his life insurance payment book. Mary and Perham then rolled the body into the nearby river and Marcus Rogers drowned. Mary tacked Marcus's hat to a tree with a forged suicide note. It took 20 minutes for Marcus to die. All the while she clung to him with the fierceness of a tigress. Before rolling Marcus's lifeless body into the Wallawamsuk River, Mary swiped his hat from the ground and secured it to a nearby tree with the very rope that had bound his hands. To the front of the hat she pinned a fake suicide note, carefully composed several hours earlier. Soon Leon of the killers started talking. Zings of nerves shot through Leon's body as he broke down and confessed. Yes, he knew the dead man. He also knew how he died. On Saturday evening, August 16th, Mary, Leon, and Stella Bates stood before the court, arraigned on first-degree murder charges. All three pleaded not guilty. Although competent lawyers defended Mary, her trial was more a formality than anything else. Leon testified against her. Even with an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence, Mary's lawyers never called a single witness. For the first time in Vermont history, a homicide defendant relied solely on discrediting the prosecution. The investigation began after the body was discovered. Perham made a full confession. At Rogers's trial in 1904, Perham was the state's key witness against her. Due to his testimony and his youth, Perham avoided the death penalty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Rogers was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by hanging. Just after Christmas in 1903, the jury returned a verdict of death, with an execution date of February 3, 1905. Only one woman had ever been executed in Vermont, so Mary's chances seemed favorable. Reverend D.J. O'Sullivan, a Catholic priest from St. Albans, led Mary's fight for mercy. December 8, 1905, Mary Mabel Bennett Rogers was hanged. More than 50 spectators gathered in the court at Windsor Prison to watch this young woman hang. Mrs. Laux assisted Mary into the black dress and shirtwaist made for this special occasion. She skipped the corset and collar. The one treasure Mary asked for was her gold chain and locket, which Mrs. Laux clasped around her neck. 6 deputy sheriffs arrived at the cell door, the death procession led by Matron Durkee. "I am ready to go, Mrs. Durkee, and I thank you for what you have done." The cell door creaked open and Mary Mabel Rogers slipped in between the line of deputies, 3 in front, 3 in back. Matron Durkee marched alongside Mary, accompanying her down 3 flights of stairs to the guard room, where Mary bid farewell to Mrs. Laux. When Mary descended the short flight of steps to the enclosed court, she caught a glimpse of the instrument of death, and winced. Her gaze lingered for a moment before rotating toward the spectators. In 40 more feet she stepped on the gallows' first tread. There a deputy tied Mary's hands behind her back and assisted her up a short flight of stairs. Without a falter, Mary reached the scaffold floor, though the color in her face drained away. Deputy Sheriff Kinneary motioned toward a seat on the scaffold, and Mary sat, her vision locked on the crowd of onlookers as though this grand event had nothing to do with her. Deputy Sheriff Kinneary leaned over and asked Mary if she had any last remarks. With a shake of the head, she uttered a soft, "No." A second officer, Deputy Sheriff Spofford, ordered her to stand and walk to the trapdoor. When she did, he veiled a large black sack over her from head to foot, tied it at the neck, along with the noose. Intense silence fell over the arena as Spofford stomped the foot pedal, releasing the trapdoor. Mary dropped. But the three-quarter hemp rope stretched. Shrouded in black, Mary's toes hit the ground. Chaos erupted. Her neck hadn't snapped in the fall. Mabel Bennett Rogers was 22 years at the time of her execution. Thank you for watching Death Row.